So next we're going to move on to the next stage. I'm going to go up to the top of my panel menu and left click on the next stage button. And that's going to take me to stage 3, walls, fences, and railing. So the house looks a little bit different here, and that's not a bad thing. We actually kind of like our site references to be a little bit cleaner and our lines easier to see. We're going to measure where the wall is going to go using our measure tool. That's something we haven't done yet. In our tools, we have our move tool, line tool, rectangle tool, and just below that we have the measure tool. Left click on the measure tool and then go to the top left-hand corner of the house. Go ahead and zoom in fairly close so you can really get to that corner easily. I'm a big fan of the zoom tool. Left click there, and then we're going to measure down 16 feet. So you can just stretch that down when you get to 16. Left click. Could have typed in that value as well. So that's always an option when you're drawing or measuring. Now, something we need to talk about with the with this stage in particular. In this stage, we do not have to complete our shapes, and that's unique to this stage. All the other stages where we're drawing shapes, we have to complete our shapes. But here we can get away with drawing a line and stopping wherever that wall stops. Okay, so that's the main thing I want you to know is that you do not have to complete your shapes here. Also, in this stage, we can set up to draw what looks like a wall or what looks like a fence or railing. So you've got a solid structure or, fence railing, something that's a little bit more transparent. Let's start with the wall. So in walls, fences, and railing section, you have to set up for what aesthetically you want to see. We want to see a wall. Now we click on the line tool and we begin drawing at the bottom of that 16-foot measurement. Left click and come to the left 12 feet. Okay, then you're going to come down 108 feet. So I'm going to kind of zoom out, pan up, and come down 108. Okay, now I'm coming to the right 94 feet, and then up 128 feet. Now to stop drawing, I can left click on the end point. I can also press the escape key on my keyboard. That's another way to stop drawing. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more so that you can check your work with mine. Make sure you have the same lengths, 12 foot, 108, 94, and 128 up the side. And that's a wall, but of course we can set the height of the wall and the width of the wall, make it look accurate for what we're trying to present. And it depends on whether it's an existing wall or maybe you're going to build the wall, but you want it to look like either what's there or what it's going to look like either way. So we look at our walls, fences, and railing, and the wall is separated into 3 sort of sections, we'll call them. The base of the wall cap, and the wall pillars. So we'll start with the wall and we'll set the height of the wall to 5 feet 0 inches. We'll set the width of the wall to 9 inches. Okay, when you click on wall cap, you're going to see the options for wall cap. The width is there. I'm going to set mine to 11 inches. And then below that, you have the style option. So when you click on style, your library is going to open to additional wall caps, different styles that you can choose from. So if you want to go into, kind of that detail, you can look at those wall caps, double click on the one that you want to apply any one of them. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close my library up. Next, we'll talk about pillars. Go ahead and click on pillars. If you don't have pillars, if they don't have pillars at all, you can just turn that toggle off and the pillars are all gone. If they do have pillars, with the pillar setting turned on, you can look at the height of the pillars, the width of the pillars, the spacing of the pillars is sometimes pretty important. If you want more pillars, you decrease the value in the spacing. If you want fewer pillars, you increase. the value in the spacing. Let's take a look at that in 3D. Okay, so I've got my wall with my pillars. If you wanted to look at the spacing in the 3D environment, see how as I decrease the value, it adds more pillars. And if I increase them, I have fewer pillars. It just starts removing them. Okay, I'm going to set mine to a spacing of 26 feet. Now around on the other side of the house, I've got a section of fence. And I want to draw the fence section adjacent to the wall. So the fence comes from the corner of the house over to the pillar. And as long as the endpoints do not connect, I can select the shapes independently and apply the settings of wall to one shape and fence to the other. As long as they're separate. If I connect them, they'll be the same shape and I cannot apply separate settings. So let's go back into 2D and we'll draw our fence. Go ahead and make sure that your wall is deselected. Click away from it. Then in your walls, fences, and railing, change the setting from wall to fence railing. Now activate your line tool. We'll draw our fence coming from the top right-hand corner of the house over to the pillar, which should be 15 feet. So I'm going to go to the corner, left click, come over to the right 15 feet, left click. That's where my fence stops. So I'll click on the modification point on the end to stop drawing. When you look over in your walls, fences, and railing settings under fence railing, you've got a lot of pieces. There's a lot more pieces to these shapes. You got posts, you have boards, you have railings, and all the spacing and settings that go with all that. If you want to just apply a wrought iron fence or a white picket fence look, you can actually just go into 3D with your fence selected and open up your library. Got my fence highlighted, the gizmos on it. I want to uncheck my wall cap presets. Let me go ahead and close those up. And I'm interested in looking at the fence presets. That's right up there at the top. Let me go ahead and click on that. All you have to do to look at one of the other styles of fences is double click. So I can double click on any of the other options. And I'm going to go with the iron spear top, but you can choose whatever you want. All right, so we have finished our wall and we finished our fence. Everything looks good. I'll go back into 2D and save my work. And we'll move on to our next objective. So next we are going to work with hardscapes. And hardscapes is in stage 7. What I want to show you now is the list of stages. Over in the panel menu, if you left click on the drop-down list of the stages, you see that there's a suggested order of the stages. And that's just what it is, suggested order that you can go in. For us today, we're going to jump ahead to stage 7, hardscapes and decks. And that's basically for training purposes. What we're trying to do is make it more convenient for you to build off of other shapes. So we're going to draw the hardscapes next because they're next to the house, and then we'll kind of build off of those shapes to create the additional shapes. So from that drop-down list, go down to 07 Hardscapes and Decks and click on that. Make sure you're in the Hardscapes and Decks stage so that we can work on those patios. So in this stage, you do have the option to draw hardscapes and or wood decks. So in your hardscapes and decks section, just below your tools, click on hardscape. Make sure you've got yourself set up correctly for the right shape. So hardscapes first, and the first one is going to be what I would call the existing patio, where the overhang is. So that's at the bottom left-hand corner of the house. and those pillars are there. We can actually use the bottom left-hand corner of the house as our site reference for drawing this hardscape shape. We'll use the rectangle tool. So go over to your toolbar and click on the rectangle tool. We worked with the rectangle tool earlier when we wanted to draw those 2 foot by 2 foot columns. And we used the shift key to prompt the system to make squares, to make all 4 sides even. Here, we've got a 20 foot by 16 foot rectangle. So an actual rectangle, you don't have to click anything, just engage the tool and drag it or stretch it to the desired dimensions. So I'll show you how that works. I've got my rectangle tool activated. I'm in the right stage. I'm going to go to the bottom left-hand corner of the house, left click, and I'm going to come to the right 20 feet, and then I'm going to stretch it down 16 feet. And you just kind of want to make sure everything's all squared away with the correct dimensions. And once you get those in place, you're just going to left click and complete your shape. So there's there's more than one way to complete a shape. I could have used the line tool and drawn that all the way around pretty quickly and easily, but you'll notice that when you start using the rectangle tool, it really is a little bit faster. Now let's look at our hardscape settings in the panel menu. In the panel menu, right under hardscape, you're going to see the height of the hardscape is going to default to 0 feet, 0 inches. That's what we want. Now, I'm not going to turn the height label on, but you can if you're wanting to see the height label on your hardscapes. That's your button right there. Follow terrain does not apply because we don't have an elevation change here. Edge trim doesn't apply. I'm not going to turn my coping on, but coping would put a ribbon or border around the outside of my hardscape. Then we have lip style, also doesn't really apply. So let's just jump over into 3D and see what we've got in the 3D environment. So basically all I did was draw that, go into 3D, checking my work to make sure that I've got a hardscape shape there. You might have a different material than I do. Probably you will. It's a random material application, usually of the hardscape category. So I've got my shape there, looks good. It's at 0 right where I set it to, and I'm going to add a couple more hardscapes back in 2D. This time I'm going to create a new patio building off of the right side of the backyard. I'm going to activate my rectangle tool again. Go to the bottom right-hand corner of the house, and I'm going to create a 26 foot by 21 foot patio shape here. So I'm going to go to the corner, left click, stretch my rectangle tool over to the left corner. That's going to be 26 feet. And then I'm going to come down 21 feet. Just kind of keep everything squared and get everything set before you click. When you see everything in the correct dimensions, you're going to left click. We're going to let the last item's settings default to this one because we just want a ground level plain patio. Okay, now I'm going to create another hardscape shape that's going to be a walkway in between these two. This will be a 6 foot wide by 20 foot long walkway, starting from the bottom right-hand corner of the first patio. Left click there. Still using our rectangle tool because these are all rectangles. I'm coming over to the right 20 feet and up 6 feet. And I want you to notice too, let me go ahead and once I complete that shape and I deselect it, notice how everything's cleanly aligned. This is a great looking configuration of decks because I don't have any gaps or spaces or overlapping of shapes. We call this a clean design. That's your goal. You really do want to have everything cleanly aligned. And in fact, even though it's in 3 pieces, when we go into 3D, it's going to be seamless. It's going to look like all one shape. Let's check it out. So there's my patio configuration. Added a new patio for the homeowner and a little walkway here. And it looks really good. but it turns out that we need to make a revision. Part of the bottom of the patio needs to be removed. So the next objective is a kind of a hypothetical example of when you might need to make a revision to a shape for whatever reasons you've got to change the shape. Rather than redraw the shape, we're going to take advantage of the modification points on the shape and a tool that we haven't worked with called the divide tool. So I'm going to show you how to remove part of the bottom shape just by manipulating the existing shape. So no need to redraw anything. We're just going to use our modification points for this next exercise, how to modify a shape. So we're going to go back into 2D. Select the 26 by 21 foot patio section. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the divide tool to separate the bottom 26-foot line segment into two sections. We're going to divide it, and we'll have a 20-foot section and a 6-foot section. So in your toolbar on the second row of tools, you have line, arc, outline, divide. Left-click on the divide tool. Now kind of zoom into the bottom right-hand side of that patio, and we'll use the grid as a measuring device. Because we know the grid is set at 1 foot, each grid line is 1 foot apart. So if I go to the bottom right-hand corner, I'm going to count 6 feet to the left, which equals 6 grid lines. So I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And on that 6th grid line, I'll use my divide tool, left-clicking, adding an additional point, and dividing the line into two sections, a 20-foot section and a 6-foot section. So it divided the line right where I needed it divided at that 6-foot marker. Now I'm going to make another revision, this time on the 21-foot vertical line on the right-hand side. I'm going to again use the grid as a measuring tool, and I'm going to measure up 5 grid lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll left click there. Okay, now we'll switch to our move tool. Click on your move tool in your toolbar. Because what we want to do is we want to move these modification points and adjust the position, but it's important to know how they work first. So the solid points on the corners move independently. The hollow point in the middle will move a section independently. Okay, so this exercise really illustrates that. I mean, I could tell you how this works, but when you see it, it's really easier to understand. So I can move that corner point independently and create a right angle here. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to left click on the corner point and drag it diagonally until I have a right angle. Okay, so that's my example of solid points move independently. Now I'm going to use the midpoint of the vertical 5-foot section to move that over to the left and open this space up. So with your move tool, left click on the hollow point in the middle of the 5-foot section. See how it highlights independently? Now I can left click and drag that over to the left, and I'll stop when my bottom line gets to 6 feet. Okay, and that is the revision that we needed to make, that we wanted to make without having to redraw our shape, and learning those tools that will help us make those revisions. Okay, next thing I want to do with this patio over here is to create an L-shaped kitchen island. This client wants a large L-shaped kitchen island, and we draw that as a hardscape. Activate your line tool and begin drawing the kitchen island at the top right-hand corner of the patio. Left-click there, come down 10 feet, and over to the left 13 feet. Okay, now to complete this shape, I'm going to show you again another version of how to complete a shape. Technically, I could use the line tool and draw the shape and finish it all the way around, or I can use the outline tool. because the other side of what I've drawn mirrors what I have, I could use the outline tool and mirror the other side. So the outline tool is a tool that mirrors existing shapes, but it also can mirror partial shapes, and that's what I want to show you. I'm going to drag this line over to my toolbar, and on the second row of tools, we have line, arc, and outline. When I click on outline, notice the orange endpoints on either end of my line segments. The question mark on your cursor is what you see when you activate the outline tool. And the question is, what do you want to outline? What do you want to mirror? I want to mirror these two line segments. So I can left click on either one of those yellow squares. When I click on the yellow square, my cursor changes to an arrow, and that provides an offset function. So if I want to offset to the other side, I move my cursor in that direction, and I have a measuring tool that goes with me and tells me how far I'm offset from the original shape. I'm going to offset 3 feet and left click, and that's going to complete my shape. So you can do that anytime you have a shape that's mirrored on one side. Or you can use your line tool and draw it all the way around. We're just showing you different options. With your kitchen island shape completed, we're going to set the height of that in our panel menu because it's going to default to the previous shape's heights. So right now, if you look over at your height box in your hardscape section, it's going to say 0 feet, 0 inches, but we want that to be 3 feet, 0 inches. And then go down to the lip style options. That's down a few settings. You've got a drop-down list that you can choose from. You've got square, round, half round, near flush, and custom. Let's just go with the basic round lip style. And then the lip height option or setting is directly below that. I'm going to set mine to a 3-inch lip height. Okay, let's take a look at that in 3D. Here's my kitchen island. And again, you probably have different materials than I do. We probably all have different materials because they're random. The system just picks a material for me, and I can change it when I get into the materials stage a little bit later. But something that this client wants is in as far as accessories, they'd like to have a grill and some warming drawers and a kegerator and a mini fridge. All of those accessories are basically just brought over from the library, dropped onto the kitchen island, and easily manipulated to be at the right elevation or attached correctly. But there is an accessory that requires a little more modification to this shape, and that's going to be a sink. And our client wants a sink. So we need to carve an opening for the sink. And the sink is the only accessory that you'll use for the kitchen island that requires this kind of, modification to the shape. So just like in real life, we've got to make an opening for the sink. We do that by going into what we call carve mode. We can carve into a shape. So I'll show you how that process works back in 2D. If you need to carve an opening in a shape, first thing is select the shape. All right, I've got my shape selected. Now I go over to my toolbar, and on the third row of tools, you have rectangle, circle, smooth, and carve. Go ahead and click on carve. That's a really important step, and you can tell by looking at your shape that it has a green envelope around it. And that means that the system is isolating this shape for a unique kind of drawing. We're not drawing a hardscape or a deck. We're carving an opening in one of those shapes. So we're going to zoom in to the top of that kitchen island. Now, I'm not going to measure today. I'm going to just give you the dimensions of the opening. And you can draw it in and you can move it as you wish. But just anywhere up here at the top, we're going to use the rectangle tool to draw a square again. So we'll revisit that. Over in your tools, click on your rectangle tool. This is going to be a 1 foot 3 inch by 1 foot 3 inch square. So we're going to hold our shift key down, left click, and drag that to 1'3" by 1'3" and left click. Now we take our move tool, left click on the line of that opening and kind of move it a little bit closer to the edge. If this were a working project, I'd probably need to do some measuring to make sure everything's in the right spot, but I'm just going to move it where I think it looks good. Take a look at that in 3D. Should have an opening for your sink there. You can use the carve function on hardscapes and custom shapes. All right, so that shape is complete, and our back patio and kitchen island configuration looks good. I want to take you to the front of the house and work on some hardscape shapes that you might encounter when you're working with driveways and entryways, hardscape steps, handrails. There will be an elevation change in the front of the property as well as the back of the property. And due to that elevation change, we'll need to know how to set up our hardscapes. So we're going to be working on a driveway. I'm going to go into 2D. We'll go ahead and draw that driveway in, navigating to the front of the house. I'm zooming in to the top left-hand corner of the front of the house. There's a driveway there. It's going to be 20 feet by 24 feet. So I'm going to use my rectangle tool. Go to that top left-hand corner, left click and come over to the right 24 feet, and then up 20 feet. Okay, so the front of the house is, we've got our driveway. When we apply the slope, that terrain is going to slope down towards the street or the sidewalk, down and away from the house. In your panel menu, you're going to see the height of your hardscape. We want it set to 0. That's really important because it's defaulting to the kitchen island setting. So make sure you change that to 0. And then knowing in advance that we're going to have the elevation change sloping down and away from the front of the house, we're going to set this shape to follow terrain, which means it's going to align to the slope. So I'm going to turn that on. Very common scenario to have your driveway kind of slope down toward the street in a residential area. And so if there's a grade change there, you definitely need to utilize that follow terrain, or your driveway will stay level and your terrain will slope away from it. Not a very effective driveway at that point. So follow terrain is pretty important in this scenario. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is draw the front entryway, and that's in the alcove, that setback there. I'm going to use the rectangle tool again, starting at the bottom right-hand corner of that entryway. So I'll show you on my screen where it is, right here. It is 10 feet wide and 18 feet long. So go ahead and get those dimensions squared away and left click. So even though there will be an elevation change taking place here, the front yard kind of slopes gradually down to the street, I don't want the walkway following the terrain. I want it to stay level. So this is a great example of when you would apply that setting and when you wouldn't. So over in your hardscapes section, set the height to 0 feet, or it will default to the 0 feet, but it doesn't hurt to check it. And then turn off follow terrain. Okay, so when we actually apply the elevation change, you will see the difference in those two shapes, and that'll give you a really good understanding of why we set those shapes the way that we did. So because there is a slope, we need some stairs coming up to this walkway, and we'll also add some handrails. And in order for this to work correctly, I'll draw my handrails first, and then I'll add the steps so that the steps fit in between the handrails. And these handrails are kind of neat. They have a decorative element to them. They come out and they curve around. So this is going to give us a great opportunity to work with the arc tool. But we're going to start with the line tool. Go ahead and activate your line tool. I'm going to draw one of the handrails, and then I'll use a method for copying and pasting so that we don't have to draw it again on the other side because they're identical. All right, let's zoom into the top right-hand corner of the walkway. I've got my line tool ready to go. I'm just going to left click and I'm going to come up 4 feet, left click. Now, this is where the handrail kind of curves out and away to the right. So I'm going to switch to the arc tool to create that curve. So I'm going to just take that line tool over to my toolbar. And when I click on the arc tool is going to pick up where the line tool left off. What I'm seeing on my screen is what we call the radius of the arc. If you move your cursor, you can reposition where that arc is. I want the arc coming directly to the right. And my radius guide kind of follows me there and tells me what my radius is. So as I extend to the right, I'll stop at 3 feet. That'll be the size of the arc. I'm going to left click to secure that radius size. When you're working with an arc, it's a 2-step process. The first step is establishing the position of your arc and the size of the radius. The next step is to establish the length of the arc. See, I can make that come around longer or shorter just by moving my cursor. I'm going to come around half circle, which is 9 feet, 5 inches. I'll left click there. I want the inside of this shape that I've drawn so far to mirror what I have. So I'm going to take advantage of that outline tool again. I'll just take my arc tool over to my toolbar, switch to the outline tool. When you bring your cursor over, you have that question mark. What shape do you want to mirror? Well, click on either one of those yellow squares and then use your offset tool to move in 1 foot. When you see that 1 foot offset, you're going to left click to complete your shape. Okay, now as far as the height, I'm going to leave the height at 0 feet. I definitely do not want these shapes to follow the terrain. I want my handrails to stay very level and flat on top. So I don't need to make any changes there. I now just need to copy and paste this over to the other side because the other side is identical to this one. I can activate my Move tool, make sure my shape is selected, and I'm going to use the hotkey for copying, Control and the letter C will copy the shape, and then Control and the letter V as in Victor will paste the shape or produce it on your cursor. You just drag it over to the opposite side, left click and drop it in. Then I'll flip that shape around, or mirror image it is the technical term. We're going to go down to the bottom of the panel menu for that. We're looking for object modification. It's down below object settings, object styles, object modification. And in object modification, look for the 2 buttons that say mirror. You can mirror horizontally or you can mirror vertically. We want to mirror horizontally, so I'm going to click on that. It's going to flip it around to go the right direction. And now I'll just use my Move tool to move it over so that the bottom right-hand corner is even with the top left-hand corner of the walkway, just like the one on the right. Okay, so I've got my 2 handrails in place. Now it's time for my steps. The steps that I'm going to build are going to kind of mirror the walkway and the handrails. And we have a stair building tool that will do just that. If you have a hardscape in place and you want stairs from that hardscape, we can use our Create Staircase Builder. That's over in your panel menu. If nothing is selected, your hardscape section is all grayed out, but down there at the bottom, you've got your Create Staircase button that you can click on. And the way that the Create Staircase feature works is it's going to give you a little generic step, we'll call it. You attach that to where you want steps generated from, and the system automatically calculates how many steps you need. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create Staircase. I'm going to bring my shape over. There's my little step. Now the key is touching my cursor to what I want the steps attached to. So here, it's important to know your cursor needs to touch the shape. So as soon as my cursor touches that end of the walkway, that step is going to snap on. I'm going to left click and drop it in. Now, had the elevation already been applied, it would calculate how many steps you need to get down to the bottom of the elevation. But we're doing it ahead of the elevation change, and I know how many steps we need, so we can apply the settings now. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and show you how to stretch that step so that it is aligned with both of the handrails. It's important to understand that the outer modification points on this step work differently than the ones that are touching the shape. The outer points move independently like this. That's not what I want. I want to stretch that whole step all the way over to the handrail. We use the point that's touching the shape to do that. So left click and drag that over to the right, and do the same thing with the bottom left hand modification point. Left click and drag that over to the left. It will snap onto that little wall. Now I'm going to go into my panel menu and scroll down to my staircase options. When you're working with the Create Staircase Builder, which is what we call this tool, you'll see your staircase options, starting with what kind of shape do you want? Normal, rounded, square. We want normal steps. We don't need a wedding cake step or a corner step. We want a normal set of steps. And the first setting that you're going to see is called depth. And depth is referencing the distance across the top or the tread on those steps. I'm going to set that to 2 feet 0 inches and make that tread a lot bigger. The height is going to define the rise of each one of your steps, so how far up or down you step. I'm going to set that to 1 foot 0 inches. You can choose what lip style you want. I'm going to leave mine at a round lip style. And then you have your step count. Now this is where I can set up how many steps I want. And I know I want 3 steps. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that value to 3 steps. And you'll see how as we build off or build onto those steps and add those 2 extra steps, they align correctly with the adjacent shapes too. Okay, now keep going down in that staircase options list. You're going to see things like risers and stringers and skirts. That applies to a wooden set of stairs that you might see attached to a deck. So risers and stringers and skirts doesn't really apply to our hardscape steps. So we can skip those settings and go down to the bottom where it says Convert Staircase to Hardscapes. And this is something that you want to do anytime you use the Create Staircase feature. Once you've used it to calculate the correct number of steps or mirror the adjacent steps, once you've kind of got everything looking the way that you want to, you need to convert this to hardscapes. So we're going to click on Convert to Hardscapes. Now that we've converted, each one of those steps can be selected independently. And more importantly, they are calculated and cataloged as hardscapes. So if you were building this part of the project, you would know how much hardscape material you would need. All right, Let's go ahead and go into 3D. It really won't look exactly right yet, but as soon as we apply the elevation change, we will see that terrain go down and away from the stairs and the handrail, and it will look more realistic. So for now, this is what we've got. We'll see this until we apply the elevation or grade change on the front there. All right, now I still have a few more things I want to draw while I'm in this stage. Actually, coming off of that walkway in the backyard, specifically the one that we modified. So the patio that we made the revision to has a little walkway extending out to what will be our pool and a wooden deck. So I'm going to use that as a site reference for drawing a wooden deck. And this is going to be a low profile wooden deck. So I'm going to go back into 2D. I'm in the right stage to draw hardscapes and decks, but I'm still working with hardscapes in my hardscapes and decks tab. So make sure you do not have anything selected and then click on wood deck to switch the system over to making wood decks. And the wood deck builder is what I call it. All you need to do is draw on the dimensions of the wood deck, apply the height, and it's going to put together and build you a wood deck. We'll do a low profile wood deck coming off that walkway next. So I'm going to zoom into the extended part of the new deck, the new patio. And I'm going to use the rectangle tool, but I want to draw a square. So this is great practice. We've gotten a lot of practice with the rectangle tool. The deck is 15 feet by 15 feet. So we're going to use the shift key to make our square. Hold your shift key down, then left click on the bottom right hand corner of that extended walkway and create a 15 by 15 wood deck. With your deck shape completed, go over to your Hardscapes and Decks tab, and we've got our wood deck settings. The defaulted height is going to be 6 feet 0 inches, but I'm going to change that to 0 feet 6 inches. And the wood deck has an interactive diagram below it, so you can click on the different parts of the wood deck to see the settings, and you can really get very detailed in how you want this wood deck to look, both on the surface, and then the underlying supports and things like that can be adjusted as well. If we click on the surface boards, we see the settings for the surface boards. We have individual boards, the width of our boards. Let's make a change to see what it looks like to set those to 1 foot 0 inches. Okay, and then down below that you have an option for the boards to overhang past the framing. I'll go ahead and turn that on. Let's take a look at it in 3D. There's my low profile wood deck. And that will be adjacent to the pool that we're going to draw a little bit later.